Hey everyone, Yukine here. In this video we're going to be doing a review on Lifa. She is a hybrid type. She is generally you're going to build her offensive and with a high priority on crit. So to start off with, her leader skill increases fire and light allies max HP by 20%. This is a okay leader skill. If you're running a advent content or something where you need that 20% HP to kind of hit some sort of health and defense threshold to tank specific hits, it might be useful. Generally, I'm going to be preferring more of a attacker type leader skill though. For her third skill, inflicts penetration damage equal to 300% of attack to one enemy, has a 50% chance to stun the target for 2 turns, and inflicts additional damage if she's enraged. The enraged is part of her first and second passive, which we'll be going over in a second. This is a pretty powerful skill. Penetration damage goes through shields, damage immunity shields. For instance, shields from Electra, Cordelia, Sid's damage immunity shield that he provides when an enemy drops below, or when a character drops below 30%. The just straight up base stun chance for 2 turns is pretty powerful as well, for PvP as well as PvE, for enemies that can be stunned. When maxed out, this goes to 480% of attack to one enemy, with an 80% chance to stun for 2 turns, and an additional 50% damage if she's enraged. The enrage effect is part of her first passive. She recovers 10% health at the start of her turn, which is pretty decent amount of health recovery. It keeps her relatively healthy throughout the fight. She enrages when there's 3 or less allies alive, including her. So if 2 of your allies have died, she'll get the enrage effect, where she increases her attack by 40% and increases her critical strike chance by 30% just permanently, as long as only 3 people are alive, which is a pretty powerful enrage effect. So not only does that increase her attack and her crit chance, that's going to do an additional 25 to 50% damage on her third skill. And then that critical effect is very important when it comes to her level 60 passive. So she gets a resolve effect on the caster and 2 adjacent allies upon taking fatal damage for 1 turn. What that means is when she takes fatal damage, so when she takes a blow that would otherwise kill her, instead she'll stay at 1 health instead of dying. She'll apply that resolve effect to the adjacent allies next to her. So generally you're not going to want to run her as a leader, unless you really need that leader skill. The resolve effect, when on the adjacent allies, until they take their next turn, they won't be able to die. And the same for her. Until she takes her next turn, you just won't be able to kill her. She is restored to 50% health when the resolve activates, which is also a pretty decent chunk of health recovery from resolve. And then one of the main reasons you're going to be building her with a lot of critical strike chance is because of this effect. She gets a guaranteed multi-strike whenever she crits. So whenever she crits, she's going to be using her first skill again on a random enemy. So yeah, that's her passives and her third skill together. Her second skill, which is essentially the best buff in the game, the best team-wide buff effect in the game. She increases all allies' attack, critical strike damage, and reduces all allies' damage taken by 20% for 2 turns. When maxed out, this will increase the attack and crit damage by 40%, while also reducing damage taken by 40% for all allies for 2 turns. This is a ridiculously powerful effect and is useful pretty much anywhere. This is when using skill ups. This will be the very first skill you're going to want to skill up just for this effect. And then lastly, her first skill inflicts damage equal to 100% of attack to one target, 45% chance to taunt for 1 turn, and then 50% chance to inflict penetration damage equal to 20% of the caster's attack if she's enraged. So again, whenever she's enraged, so whenever there's 3 or less allies alive, she's going to get some additional damage on her first and her third skill. When maxed out, this will be 160% of attack to one target, 65% chance to taunt the target for 2 turns, and 50% chance to inflict penetration damage equal to 40% of attack if she's enraged. So yeah, generally you're going to want to build her as the same as you would any other attacker. If you don't have any tanks, she is an option to build up as a tank with that damage reduction. Though generally you're not going to build her super tanky. If you did build her tanky, you'd probably go HP defense set with crit chance set, or double HP with defense and as much crit chance as possible. Going into runes, again, I would highly recommend building her as more of an attacker. So what I would go for on the rune effect, you're going to want to get as much crit chance as possible to get that multi-strike procs whenever she crits. Counter strike is fine on her. I would highly recommend not building any multi-strike on her if at all possible. Mainly just because you're going to be getting all your multi-strikes whenever you crit anyways. So any stats going into multi-strike are pretty much wasted. So my personal preference is to run Rune of Rage for the 20% attack with Rune of Assault. Rune of Assault is not a very good rune set in general, except for crit-centric characters. If you can help it, it's not very stat point effective. You're only getting 5% crit for 2 set versus like Rune of Life, which gives you 10% HP for 2 set. If you look at the subs here, HP and crit chance generally roll the same. So if you can, you would probably prefer to get Rune of Life for the 10% HP bonus, and then just have like double or triple crit chance subs on these first 2 slots. And again, you're going to want as much crit chance as possible to get those multi-strikes out. So first 2 slots, HP increase, crit chance, crit damage is another useful option here. So as long as you have any of those 3, preferably crit chance over everything else, you should be good. And again, going back to this set, the only reason I really prefer this over HP is because she can double dip on that set bonus, where that's effectively 5% crit chance, 5% multi-strike for her, instead of just 5% crit chance that would be for anyone else. For this slot, you're going to go triple HP increase or HP with counter strike, preferably just as much HP as possible on the 3rd slot. For the 4th slot, attack, counter strike, HP recovery, those are all viable options, preferably as much attack as possible. And then for the 5th slot, again, attack, counter strike, HP recovery, preferably as much attack as you can fit, though the 5th slot is generally a slot that's very difficult to get the perfect stats for. Preferably you want triple attack here. I've never gotten it. I've maybe gotten a few double attacks. So just whatever you can fit here, attack, counter strike, HP recovery, are all fine. And then lastly, for the very last slot, you're going to want to go triple crit chance. or again, her passive. Regarding hero talents, you're going to be going for crit chance on the level 50 talent. Preferably 3-star. It's very easy to get 3-star on the 50 talent for that 20% crit chance. And then you'll go for 3-star on her, or just as much as you can. You want to get attack on her for the 52 talent. For the 54 and 58 talents, that really depends what you're running her in. If you're doing her, or if you're using her for PvE, you want to go for the boss damage reduction and the boss damage increase. If you're using her in arenas, which right now I happen to be using her for arenas, she's a featured unit in arenas this week, you're going to want to go for the arena damage increase and arena damage taken decrease. Now this one, her 56 talent, you can either go for the defense increase. I personally prefer to go for the payback, which is at 3 stars, a 20% chance to increase her critical strike chance by 30% for 2 turns whenever she is attacked. There is a crit cap, which is 75%. You cannot get above 75% crit chance. So with this 53%, she will be over the crit cap with that. But I generally just use this one, so for both PvE and PvP content, to kind of get her to that 75% cap, just to get more effect out of that multi-strike and counter-strike as much as possible. Or the multi-strike procs from crits as much as possible, just so I don't have to rely on 2 other allies dying just to her enrage effect to get her to that crit cap. And that's generally how you would want to rune Lifa. If you are going to be building her as a tank, if you just for whatever reason happen to never have any tanks that are viable, like you just never were able to pull an Electra or something and you need a fire tank, again, you could max out her second skill and then her first skill for the 2-turn taunts, and then you would want to build her as much HP and double HP defense set with as much counter strike as possible. But again, she's a character that I would generally recommend that you build offensively over as a tank. She's not very powerful as a tank. She's not going to have that threat modifier that tanks have. So you're going to have to rely on her doing more damage than your DPS to keep aggro, or taunting with her first skill to keep threat. So, but yeah, that's my review on Lifa. For those of you interested, please feel free to drop by in my Twitch channel. I stream during the weekdays starting around 7 p.m. EST. I will be posting the link to my Twitch in the YouTube description. Thank you for watching.